Hello and welcome to Confidently Wrong, a show by regular dudes talking with confidence about content we have no right to speak about with any kind of authority, but do it anyway. I'm Wesley Nakamura, and today I'll be joined by a blast from the past, the man, the myth, the legend, Battlefield Mike Smith. Then I'll follow up with a separate conversation with Savon Jones, aka Captain Vonnie. This is episode 128, and we're reacting to the season finale of Ahsoka. I'm confident that it's going to be the best show you've ever listened to, and well, hey, if it's not, you can always ask us for a refund.
Incredible!
Look at that countdown. We're like professionals in a studio. It's like we had a producer bringing us in, Mike.
I leave, and the game really gets stepped up.
Nice. All right. Well, it's great to have you back on the show. It's been like, I don't know, a year? How long has it been?
A while, baby. I'm back. You can edit some air horns over that.
Some DJ Khaled. Pow, pow, pow.
Pow, pow.
Yeah, so you left the show, you abandoned us, and you went on and did great things with your life, like get engaged. Like, what the fuck? Engagement. Marriage is for losers, bro. I don't know what you're doing.
Wait till I tell you about having children.
Big time tied down. No, but you're getting married soon. Like, really soon.
I am in 8 days.
Okay. So, everybody likes to put their own little personal stamp on their weddings. What is something that you and Anna are doing that is, for funsies, like, that you're kind of stoked about? You're like, this is cool. This is fun for me.
During our wedding?
Yeah.
I don't know if a single thing comes to mind, but okay. I will say that our entire, we're both pretty stubborn only children.
Yeah.
And a lot of weddings is expectations of ways you should do things. And
Sure.
We are kind of just saying, screw that. And we're doing what we want to do.
So what are some things you want to do that maybe don't quite fit in with the traditional expectations for your family?
A lot of the wedding system, a lot of the wedding industrial complex, and just kind of the larger, wedding.
You need a drone. You need a drone.
It's all very patriarchal, It's all about the woman going to the man and all that. But she's great. Who am I? I'm just some schmuck, So she's not taking my name.
Okay.
We are not doing pronounce you husband and wife and any of that type of stuff. And
what are you going to be pronounced?
The bride and groom, I think. Which
okay, right.
I don't really know
that
how
seems
different
like the
that
same.
is, but look, man, I'm an ally. I just I listen. It's about listening. But really just doing what we want and keeping it pretty low key. It's more so about a party than it is about the big ceremony. Because I don't know about you and Jem, but we've been together 7 years prior to marriage. So
yeah, that's about how long. I think we were together 7 or 8 years for sure.
And did anything change? The Monday after your wedding? Was your relationship fundamentally different?
It did not. Nothing at all, which I think is a good thing.
That's the advice I got. Don't get married until it won't change anything about your relationship. So if any of the nerds listening to this show, are thinking about getting married, just, take a step. Think about, where you're at.
I think the only thing that kind of changed a little bit was our conception of money a little bit.
Sure.
We were just a little bit more hey, let's make sure we're on the same page here, plan here, all that good stuff. But
your actual relationship,
each other,
rather,
how we work
together,
Nah.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm really excited because, Mike, this was kind of last minute. I just hit you up and I was like, hey, Ahsoka just finished. I would love to bring in, your Battlefield Mike thoughts, on a series that is easy to hate but also easy to love, I think in a number of different ways. And you stepped up and you said, yeah, you know what, I could hop on for a minute here. So you're saving my enthusiasm for the show just by being here. So I appreciate that. All right, let's do it. Spoilers are going to happen. We're going to talk about Ahsoka, the series, 8-part Disney Plus, all the doodads, all the visual effects that they could muster. Except wire work. They wouldn't do any of that. So it was great. So Ahsoka wrapped up this week. We're able to see, all kinds of new stuff in the live action universe. Although a lot of the stuff had been things that were present in the Clone Wars, were present in the Rebel series. But this is the first time certain people have made their way into live action and certain artifacts, the Talzin sword, things like that. So let's start where where I think in some ways probably was like the coolest part of the show in some ways was the villains. So we've got Balin Skull,
Sure.
one of the former Jedi,
R.I.P.
kind of an old
To Ray
soul.
Stevenson,
Yeah.
by the way.
Yeah, he passed away,
So
I believe in May, and they
right
dedicated the
before the
first
show came
episode to
out.
him.
Big shame because he, I think, was the highlight of the show, but we'll get into that.
Okay, we'll get into that. Good tease. I like that. See, you haven't lost your professional touch there, my friend. His apprentice, we'll call her Shin Hati. We got Morgan
Mhm.
Elsbeth, who plays kind of a Dathomiri, not ancestor, what a descendant. She's kind of a descendant of the Dathomiri witches. And then we get the big bad sort of kind of Grand Admiral Thrawn. So what I wanted to know from
Mhm.
you was what stands out to you about the villains. You can talk about just in context of the show, or you can just talk about in terms of their characters. What did you like? What did you not like? What did you think of all these kind of different villains?
Of the villains, just the villains.
Yeah, just the villain.
Okay.
You could even
Yeah,
talk
I
about
think.
Merrick if you want, but he had a weird ignominious
No,
end in like
I
episode 3
mean,
and
I
then
feel
never
like
came
the
back.
most notable thing of that show was people like coming up with conspiracy theories of who he was, and it ended up being nobody, which is typical
Exactly.
Star Wars fashion.
Yep.
We didn't even need J.J. Abrams this time to do that. I think the villains were a high point of this show. I think again, R.I.P.
You
to Ray
do. Okay.
Stevenson. I think out of all of the villains, he stood out. I think he stood out in kind of recent Star Wars just period. An incredible performance. I think kind of gray Jedi and that space in between Sith and Jedi isn't kind of something that's been explored really thoroughly. And I think having this be the first time we really got there, and I think he did an excellent job. I think the acting was great. I think the fight choreography was great. Like we haven't really seen besides Kylo Ren and the sequels. We haven't seen people with like a heavier lightsaber and a fighting style to go with it. So I think that was really cool. So he's definitely the highlight. You mentioned you seeing people for the first time in live action. Obviously, seeing Night Sisters in live action was very cool, and I think they did a great job with that. I think they looked really cool. I think they had the same vibe, so I think that was something that translated really well, and I think they plugged in well as well. Sometimes like that would be a side plot that might seem forced, but given that Dave Filoni, I think, is so familiar with these stories, and I'll talk more later on about how this is really just another Rebel season. I think they kind of slotted in really well and look really cool. I think Shin Hati was pretty cool, probably the weaker of the villains. I mean, a great foil to Sabine, and I think we'll see more of her in future seasons. Not bad. I just think not as standout as some of the others. And then Morgan Lisbeth was also great. I
Thrawn.
think, and then I'll get to Thrawn, obviously. Yeah, Morgan Lisbeth again, great. Connected to the Night Sisters was kind of the bridge there. And then Thrawn, I think, that could have gone a lot of different ways. Obviously he's going to be the big bad that's going to unite all the shows in the inevitable Mandoverse movie. So this was kind of like the first glimpse. So this isn't his final form, so to speak. Obviously they brought back the voice actor from the animated show, which was, I think, probably the right move. Does that guy look like Thrawn? Maybe not. I think he, more than anybody, kind of just stood out. Like it just kind of looked like someone acting rather than like a genuine character. But I mean, he's just, the voice is so iconic and he delivers it so well. I think the effect of the character still kind of comes across. Like he dominates every scene he's in. He's intense. He completely shifts the narrative of any scene he's in. And I think they continued that. So excited to see where he goes. And if they change maybe the look a little bit.
So for the villains, I did like kind of the potential of Balin Skull, but I think by the end I was kind of just met on him. Especially the fact that in the second to last episode, he just kind of bails and is like, I'm going to go do my own thing now. I don't really want to be a part of this anymore. And then he goes and stands on a rock, or maybe that was the last episode.
No, so that
And it just felt
statue.
like
Okay, well, before you go on, because I think
it's
you
the
might be.
father, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's obviously they were
Yeah,
going to be
but
leading into something else pretty significant with him. So I think it's not his story's not really over here.
yeah. And I guess that's fine. But he was in every episode up until that point, and for him then to just like disengage from the story just kind of felt like, well, what's the point of that then? Like he didn't have to be in there as like an every episode character, but he was. And so I don't know, I was just hoping they would actually like have him participate more, and if he ended up there at the end after a battle or something, great. But he didn't. He was literally in the middle of a battle and was like, "I'm out. I'm just gonna go over here and good luck to you guys and have a good time." And I think we didn't know why he was doing that, which also brings me to the point about Thrawn, which is I was a little bit disappointed. We didn't two things about Thrawn. I think what you said was right. He's clearly like a great tactician. He's going to be interesting, and I think as they develop him more, it'll be more and more like we'll see what he's about. But I think the fact that we didn't actually get to see why he was like so hell-bent on getting back, or what he thought was in it for him. Was he still loyal to the old empire? Was he interested in like remaking the empire in his own image? There's so much about what he wants to do that we didn't really get a sense of it. Like, why are these other people beholden to him? Why does Morgan believe in him? Why did the Night Sisters believe in him? Why do his death troopers, or whatever they're called, the zombie troopers, why do they follow
Because
him?
they're Nazis, Wesley. That's like implied throughout the whole thing. It's just the fanatical devotion to the empire. I mean, and they kind of hinted at that, and that came up a few times. And then in the end, all the guys that were willing to go essentially fight and be left behind, they said because I don't even remember what the verb was, but they're obviously about it too. So I think he's just stuck on the idea of the empire and kind of at how it is as essentially an allegory for he's
Yeah.
like a Nazi, that's
I
hiding in
think I
a
think they should have
bush,
done
40 years
more about
later.
that then, to make that clear that like that was his devotion, was to the empire itself, or to the whatever. I mean, I don't even know if he knows that the empire is no longer together. There's just so much that like we
No,
didn't learn
I
about
don't think
him.
yeah. I think, I get what you're saying, but
But Morgan should
I
have
think
told him. Morgan came from the world where the empire had fallen.
I mean, it's probably assumed that it is.
That she
I
told him,
I
right?
feel like that
Yeah.
yeah, and I think
Yeah.
it's hinted at a few times that he's going to go back and, I
I don't
think,
know.
one thing, it seems like a lot of your issues are kind of that, it didn't have a clear beginning, middle, and end, or
Maybe.
like kind of just a. But to me, it's like this is just another season. Again, I think like the biggest criticism I've seen with the show, and look, I've not been into most of the Star Wars content. I like Mando season 3, but like a lot of the other stuff, especially the rest of the Disney shows, I have not been like a big fan, obviously.
Yeah.
But
You
with
love
this,
the last trilogy. The whole thing.
oh,
Ray.
I'm just talking
All,
about the Disney Plus shows. I'm not even talking about those movies. Um, to me it's like this is just another season of Rebels.
okay.
It's not the beginning of the show, it's not the end of the show, it's furthered the plot. And I think a lot of the people that didn't like the show and a lot of the criticisms I was seeing, it was very much based on like you need to see Rebels. So I think
Mm.
people are sick of like Marvel, Star Wars, Disney content of like you need to do all this homework to know what's going on. But with this show, you do, and I think it's just another season of Rebels. And I think almost naming it something different misleads people, and I think it's led to a lot of people being frustrated. But I think when you love Rebels and you go into the show and it's just the continuation of that story, I think that kind of alleviates a lot of the criticisms you have.
I see. I have not seen all of Rebels. I've only seen a little bit of the beginning. You've watched all of it?
Rebels fucking rocks, dude.
Okay.
Everybody I know who's seen Rebels, even people who are not like big nerds or big star, are like that is the best show. It starts out kind of very childish, similar to Clone Wars, but like the story is just so good, man. And it follows one group. It's not like kind of a what's the word I'm thinking of? It's not like small vignettes like Clone Wars. It's like one group and it follows them from beginning to end, and it's an amazing story. And this is just a continuation. So I highly, highly, highly recommend watching Rebels for anybody that kind of likes this story, might not have known what was going on, or really just Star Wars fans that are okay with animation, Rebels is absolutely a must watch, with keeping in mind that the beginning of it, similar to Clone Wars, is very childish.
Amazing. It's like you read my mind on the next question. So, um, as someone who has seen both Clone Wars and Rebels, which means you've seen most of Ahsoka's story at this point, and
Mhm.
then got to see her now in her own live action show, you've now kind of seen her from a young Padawan learner to, at the end of Clone Wars, she's kind of more of a responsible, kind of thinking on her own Jedi, although she's, left the Jedi Order. And then as someone in Rebels who joins the rebellion, and is integral in helping try to fight off involved in Mandalorian,
Mhm.
stories
Mhm.
now and fighting off Maul and all of these things. But certainly as a much, I don't know, I guess more polished Jedi at that point, right? Her physical look has changed at that point. Um, what did you think of Ahsoka in this show? What made it work for you? What didn't make it work? I will say, I think for me, I was surprised because, and maybe this is partly because I hadn't seen Rebels. Rosario Dawson and the writers made her much more stoic in this one.
Yeah.
which
Like
maybe
like
maybe makes sense given
sedate,
that
not even stoic.
yeah. Well, I think it is. I mean, it's very much how Obi-Wan was, at that point, in A New Hope. And so she's sort of at that place in her career. She's been through multiple wars now. She's been through multiple losses now at this point, and different kind of associations with different groups. She's had a lot of experience at this point with what it means to be a Jedi. And so I do think if you're saying, well, okay, that stoicism is earned, that's fine. It was just jarring, I think, to see her be, the one who's calling Anakin, Sky Guy in Clone Wars, to
Mhm.
now being much more mature, much more like I'm the adult in the room, and I kind of have a sense of what's going on here. She has to deal with kind of her fear of being let down. She has to deal with fear and pain, or sorry, fear of pain that comes from like the dark side, right? She's having to deal with um differentiating her training with Sabine rather than doing kind of what Anakin did with her or what she's seen Obi-Wan do with Anakin. She really has to work with Sabine and decide, like, I'm actually going to adapt my training around my Padawan rather than another way, of doing it. And then we see her have to trust the Force here in a way that maybe she hasn't before, or maybe a reminder that, right, you kind of have to just trust the Force in some ways. So she has to let go of her control of the situation and just trust that the Purgle are going to take her where she needs to be. Um, all of these things that she has to go through the show. And I'm like, man, she had so many cool lessons and changes and development to her character and her perspective through the show that um we don't always get with the Disney, Plus show, with the Star Wars show.
Mhm.
There were several moments where she is actually changed by the events in the show, and I love that about this show, that we get to see her develop and change and grow in a way that we don't always get to with our protagonist. So I thought that was cool. What did you think?
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think the way the character is makes sense for her larger journey. She has some pretty significant moments in Rebels, especially later on. So, um, won't spoil that for you. But I think, again, as the continuation of the character, it does make sense. I think the one thing that didn't work for me, and I said it earlier, is just something about the way Rosario, and I think largely Rosario Dawson does a good job. I think they got the look down. Like, you're looking at that character, which is kind of a hard look to pull off in live action, and you're not, at least for me, I'm not seeing Rosario Dawson like I'm seeing Ahsoka Tano. So, I think that worked really well. They changed the head tails from her appearance in Mandalorian. I think that worked really well. I think they did an even better job with the lightsaber combat. Again, I think that was an evolution of what we saw from her in Rebels and Mandalorian. Um, so I think a lot of the character worked for me. I think one thing that really didn't work for me, and again I hinted at this earlier, is just how sedate Rosario Dawson plays Ahsoka. Like, I get she's traumatized, I get all that, but like even with Obi-Wan, like he like had personality. Like Ahsoka just seems like she's half asleep the entire show. Like she's just waking up. And I don't know why, but like
You
it
didn't
just
vibe with
seems
that.
unnatural. No, and it takes me out of the moment like every time. So I kind of got used to it and I stopped noticing it. Another thing with this show is that it's called Ahsoka, but it's really about like a lot of other stuff. So as her kind of like the central part of the orbit, um, it was okay, but just that one aspect, I don't know why, it just really rubbed me wrong. But I think on a macro level, I was very happy with how they did everything.
Yeah, I mean, you could almost call this show the Sabine show, and it still be
Yeah,
the
Sabine
same show.
show. Yeah, it became the Ezra show. It's just Rebels. It's about that group of people, and kind of the focus of it shifts from episode to episode. So it's just Rebels, which I think Dave Filoni said it was going to be. So again,
All right. What were your, as a Star Wars fan who loves to hate on Star Wars, what were your favorite moments in the show?
the lightsaber combat, I think across the board was really good. They evoked Kanan a lot. Kanan is probably my favorite Jedi. So, if you don't look at it as just another Rebel season, I think they kind of alluded and evoked a lot of stuff from Rebels that I think really worked. Um, I I think Ray Stevenson and Balin Scroll, as well as Thrawn, I think were good villains that I think were a good foil for a lot of the character development on the heroes. So I think um just kind of overall another solid season of Rebels. Like the last season was excellent, and this was another season that was excellent.
Okay, tell me what you thought about the lightsaber battles. To me, it felt like so many of them were really good examples of lightsaber battles. I don't know. I was just enjoying watching them. They just felt visceral. They felt cool. Sometimes it had like really great choreography, and sometimes it was just about like the brute force nature of it. There was a couple things that I hadn't like necessarily seen that often before, like Merrick or Marok's spinning lightsaber. He threw it.
That's in Rebels a lot.
And it spun and it went past Rosario Dawson, and then it came back like a boomerang, and she just like whoop, a little sidestep, and it went right past her. That kind of thing. Ezra stopping the blade with his force, like a force push almost, and you could see the blade like deflecting the energy from him as Shin Hati was attacking him. And he did that whole fight without a lightsaber, which was like pretty badass. It's like, oh, this guy's pretty powerful at this point in his career. And then Sabine getting to use blasters and lightsabers while she's fighting was cool.
And Beskar armor at the same time. She's like deflecting blasts. She's shooting. Yeah,
it's like, so she's getting to marry like her different, backgrounds into one here. And then I think I love talking about Sabine here because what worked for me for her was she had so many moments where she's like they call her, like the least powerful Jedi or least force sensitive Jedi that they've ever seen. And Hu Yang kind of bags on her, and in the beginning, and we see her several moments like try to use her force powers, and it doesn't work. She's failing, quote unquote, failing at being a Jedi. And what I loved about that was just like she continues to work at it, and people continue to have faith in her. And throughout the show, we're just getting to see like little moments of like, ooh, maybe this is the moment. And it's like, nope, not yet. You have to keep working. You're not there yet, right? You haven't opened yourself up to the Force yet. You haven't allowed yourself to be vulnerable. You haven't had the true 100% support of the people around you. And by the end, we get to see her start to unlock some of those powers and be able to push Ezra up into the ship and let go of needing to like be with him every single moment, right? And say like, you're on your own journey now and I'm on this journey, and like it's okay for us to not be together. Like I need to go through this other thing right now. And that to me like really was the fun part of the show, was seeing Sabine kind of do all these things that weren't even Jedi things. They were just like failures of Jedi things. But like we haven't seen too many people like fail since like Luke, right? In Empire.
Yeah.
And then by the end of Empire, he was like a badass again.
Yeah.
you know, so it's cool to see, Jedis like have to train, they have to put in the work. Their 10,000 hours is also, a real thing. So I don't know. I like that about it. Okay.
Yeah,
So Order
I think that.
66. Yeah.
No, go ahead. There's like a
Or
delay.
Oh, yeah. So Order 66, kills all the Jedi except all of the Jedi that survived. So if you had to restart the Jedi Order with any Jedi that survived Order 66 or someone who was born afterwards, this is kind of just a side quest question. I want to see where you're going with this. Where does Mike's kooky brain go with this? Who is the person who's going to restart the Jedi, practice for you? Who's going to be leading your Padawans? Let's say you had a Force sensitive, kid. Who are you entrusting with the Jedi training here?
God, if only we had like a well thought out trilogy following that and the consequences of messing that up, Wow. Yeah, obviously the answer's Luke, but I mean, we got fucking 3 movies about that and it doesn't make a lick of sense. So, next question.
All right, I'm not going Luke. Luke was too scared. And clearly, when given the opportunity, he raised Kylo Ren. So, I'm not giving Luke the reins to restart the Jedi Order. I'm going with Leia. I think it seems trite because I was thinking Rey. At first, I was like, she'd be cool. She's very confident. She understands like, hey, I don't want to be discounted. She comes from a life of struggle, so she's not going to take opportunities for granted. But she's still on her learning path. She's not quite there yet where I want to say like, yes, you're definitely the right one to lead the Jedi Order. It's definitely not Luke for the reasons I said. Ahsoka, I think, would be cool, but she seems like kind of a loner right now. I don't know that she wants to have the pressure of, raising a bunch of young Jedi. She's struggling enough with one
I
right
think
now.
Ezra would be a good answer.
You think Ezra? I mean, he builds community.
Yeah.
He's pulling the Nati together.
Yeah.
So maybe, but I'm going with Leia. I think she, throughout all the series that she's been in, or all the trilogies that she was in, she was inspiring for others. She clearly cares about the well-being of others. She was mentoring Poe Dameron, in a couple of the movies.
Did you really just bring me on here so we can talk about the sequels?
No, but she sees the good in everyone, and so I want her to see the good in my kid if my kid's a Jedi.
She's only a Jedi because she is in The Rise of Skywalker, and that movie makes no fucking sense. So
that movie makes no sense.
Is she a Jedi really? So,
she's clearly.
I get the question. I think if you remove the sequels, if we decanonize them as they should be,
okay, all right,
and the answer would obviously be Luke. I don't think it's even much of a question, but we can't say that now because fucking J.J. Abrams. Excuse my language, but you brought up the sequel, so it's kind of your fault.
Fine. This actually works out well because it is a favorite pastime of Star Wars fans to just absolutely hate on Star Wars. So what were, besides maybe, what you were talking about earlier, what were some other weaknesses that you saw on the show or things you were like, that just didn't quite work for me?
I think, mostly the way Rosario Dawson plays Ahsoka, as I mentioned, is my biggest gripe.
Hater.
There's nothing like honestly major comes to mind, to be honest. I think it was, to me, it wasn't like the best thing I've ever seen, but it was just another good season of Rebels following them. I actually, now we're thinking of it, I didn't like Hera that much. I like the character, but having her in the Rebels costume in live action did not really work. And I am interested to see where they go with her and Kanan's son. I was really excited to see that kid, and that was the first time they really mentioned Kanan. But if they don't go somewhere with him, obviously, he's Force sensitive, they're alluding to. If they don't go somewhere with him, in retrospect, I'll have been kind of irritated having the kid as a major point at any point.
I'm not going to add anything. I think I already said what I thought were some of the weaknesses. All right, so there's now been a few Disney Plus Star Wars shows. We've got The Mandalorian, which I think kicked us off many, many moons ago. We have Boba Fett, Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Andor, and Ahsoka. You have the unenviable task of trying to rank them from best to worst on the Mike scale. What are you going with? Maybe a little bit about why.
So what
What would you
I
go
think
with?
is best, or what is my favorite?
You go with that however you like. I would just say you get to rank them.
I think you got to put Andor first. I just think
Okay.
it's just kind of just the fact that it's objectively a good show. You know, it's I think it's good Star Wars, but it's also just like excellent TV. Like it's just an excellent kind of spy
Savon would
thriller
say it's not
political
really Star
drama.
Wars.
I mean, it's in the Star Wars world. It says
Sure.
Star Wars in front of the title. It's focused on the inner workings of the Empire and kind of that specific the bureaucratic changes across the galaxy. So,
Okay.
I mean, that's a we could debate that, but ultimately that's a pretty arbitrary
Okay.
thing. I think Andor, obviously, Book of Boba Fett is last, so I'm gonna go from one to the
Obviously.
bottom. Book of Boba Fett is
Okay.
the worst. Then
Okay.
Obi-Wan, which is crazy because in the moment it didn't feel that bad, but it's like I haven't gone back and like for such like a hyped show and like just like seeing that happen, like the fact that it just kind of came and went, I just sometimes you just got to listen to the vibrations in the air, and it's obvious that shows didn't really have the staying power,
Right.
and that just says something in itself.
So that leaves you with
um
Mandalorian and Ahsoka to fit in somewhere in that space.
I think you got to go Mando 3 and Ahsoka 2.
Okay.
So um I think Mando probably has higher heights, but it's got a lot lower lows. I mean, it's got so many filler episodes, it's got so many side quests. And Ahsoka is just again, like I'm gonna keep saying it, it's just another Rebel season, and Rebels is just a linear story following one group of people, which I think is just kind of a better, it's just better. And I think you can do vignettes like the Clone Wars, but just like having random side quests just gets tiring in the Mandalorian, and it leads to having a lower floor. Um, so I think that's where I would go. We're going.
Yeah, this is one story. We're not doing side quests.
There's no side quests. Every moment
Yeah.
is progressing the story in some way. There's not like to do this you need to go do this other thing. It's all very just moving forward.
Star Wars sometimes falls into that trap. You got to go get the little holocron thing.
Well, I think that's just a Mandalorian thing, and then the they did that a lot in the
Yeah.
sequels, but I think that's just something, and obviously the Mandalorians dictated a lot of kind of the larger narrative around Star Wars, as it's kind of like the biggest thing since the movies. But I think this show kind of goes back to more linear storytelling.
Hmm. I would definitely put Andor first. I enjoyed that series the most out of any of these shows. I love the performances. I love the writing. I love seeing like all these worlds and how they were built. I think the fact that it wasn't filmed in the volume actually plays to its huge strength. We see many like real worlds with real scenic like backdrops, and we see like exteriors around actual built sets or cities or whatever. In both Ahsoka and Mandalorian, there's just quite a few moments where you're just like, it just feels like they're standing in the middle of like this area in the volume. I still feel like I can tell this scene was in the volume because they don't go anywhere. There's not anything
Is the
happening.
volume that screen thing
Hmm.
they use?
And it's as big as a warehouse. It's
Okay.
a giant setup.
Yeah.
But I mean, on the
Yeah.
scale of horses and people riding horses, you're just not gonna get to go that far, and that I think contributed to my feeling like, man, this just doesn't quite feel the same amount of epic as Andor felt, even though Andor was a very intimate
Mhm.
show in some ways, right? It was very focused in on
Mhm.
like the faces of these people and what they were doing, and just like phenomenal performances. So that's my number one. Still, I think it beats out Ahsoka. In some ways, I want to tie Ahsoka and Mandalorian because in Mandalorian,
Yeah.
we're just learning so much about
But you
like
can't do that. So,
what's
but you can't do
going
that. So you're
on.
gonna have to
I
pick one.
know. I know. I want to have them as a tie because I love so much of what Mandalorian is. It's iconic for introducing Grogu, right? Like everybody knows who Baby Yoda is. That was a seminal moment. I don't think Ahsoka is gonna hit that. We're not gonna all know like, oh, who Sabine Wren is. If I went up to people on the street, they wouldn't know who Sabine Wren is, but they're gonna know who Baby Yoda is. Um, And so in some ways, just like having those iconic moments, and then also we're getting a ton of backstory on what's happening with like the identity of Mandalorians, and like how there's actually, the Watch, and there's all these other things going on, and the Mandalorian wasn't even Mandalorian in some sense. And that presented all kinds of tensions. I think that's like the stories they were telling in that show were just like really fun, really cool, and just like intriguing in a way that Ahsoka also has, but it's a little bit different. But I agree, like, the frog chasing the one where they had to take the frog with the eggs and stuff, and it just all felt like, oh, come on, like, get
Mm-hmm.
to the story. This is not what we're watching it for.
Mm-hmm.
We want to see Moff Gideon. um
Mm-hmm.
those were just like, oh, just the episode, like, ah, kill me now. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would go Mandalorian ahead of Ahsoka, barely, maybe. And then I would put Obi-Wan next, I think. That's hard. And Book of Boba Fett. Which one is the one where they ended the fight in the city with the mods and the mopeds and the
Book of Boba
Rancor?
Fett with the
Okay.
stupid spin move.
Okay. That one is last. Killing that being the final episode, season finale of that show, killed me, and I'm out on that one. So that one's my last place. Obi-Wan is next because Leia ran through the woods for like 40 minutes, evading an adult male chasing her on regular normal adult legs. There's no way that was happening. All right, let's wrap it up, Mike. Any other thoughts? I think one thought I want to share is that I think people still hate on The Last Jedi too hard, and they hate on this show too hard for it not being what they thought it was going to be, or like not. I don't know. They're just like, oh, I think Ahsoka should have been this, and blah blah, and I think Sabine is not even a worthy Jedi, blah blah. And it's like their conception of what came before means that they can't like allow for these characters to adjust or change over time. Um, it rankles me that just like the takes are so condescending about what makes Star Wars a legitimate Star Wars, especially since they're criticizing people who like near the people who make the shows who like love Star Wars, right? And so, yeah, okay, you don't agree with it or you don't like it, that's fine, that's one thing. But to say like that is not true Star Wars, like that kind of like take just,
Yeah, and it's
I
Dave
just hate that.
Filoni.
And I hate
Dave
that this
Filoni
show,
wrote
yeah,
he wrote this whole show. That's
right.
like who George Lucas like passed the baton to. Like it is. And if
Well,
you
and he
don't
wrote
like it,
Clone
that's
Wars and
fine. But
Rebels.
yeah, he didn't write all of Rebels, or all of Clone Wars, because there's a million episodes
But I'm
of
sure he's
that. But
involved.
like super
Yeah.
involved. No, yeah, and he did write most of Rebels, and he came up with most of that larger plot line. Like it just is. That's what the show is now. And in fact, between the Clone Wars and Rebels, and then how he's kind of not changed the direction, but directed the Mandalorian, like that's just where we're at. Like it's all focused around Mandalorian people for a long time, which is why Sabine is a big focus. So if people don't like Rebels, you're not going to like the show, and if you like Rebels, you are. It's just that simple. So I mean, like people delegitimize Star Wars all the time, but like get a life, dude.
Well, but people don't like
Get a
that
life.
Sabine is becoming a Jedi now, right? Because they're like, well, she didn't show any Jedi
But
powers
she has
in
been in
Rebels.
She did. She did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's people just have to watch that show. I mean, it's almost like I don't want to hear takes unless you've seen that show.
All right, fair enough. Mike, I'm excited for you to be a married man, a married boy.
Oh, we need to talk about one more
Yeah.
thing. One more thing. Sorry, I do appreciate though. Hayden Christensen, I thought was excellent. I'd be remiss if we didn't bring him up.
I'm a huge Hayden Christensen hater. And I thought he was great.
Yeah, he did his job. Like, is he the best actor in the world? No, but he's Anakin. He is Anakin, and he did a good job. And I think bridging the gap between an animated character and his live action character, I think the chemistry was there. I think it just worked. And I think like Anakin is just like the guy. I saw actually a funny meme. It was like, Thrawn freaking out when he found out who the random Jedi chasing him in the other
Ahsoka
galaxy was, whose Padawan it was.
Yeah.
And then when he finds out who overthrew the Empire when he gets back to the galaxy, because he's scared of Anakin, obviously, and now he has to deal with his, theoretically his Anakin's son, and then his also Padawan.
Yeah. He's right to be afraid or cautious, wary. What do you think? What do you think is the cargo that he's loading into the ship?
I have no idea.
They didn't give us any real clues. I think they're people, but I don't know who. I think they're people.
They did look coffin shaped.
Yeah. Or like some kind of cryo chamber, like a sleep chamber of some sort.
I mean, they're gonna have to like connect this to the clone nonsense, unfortunately.
Like
so we'll see.
cloning Snoke and cloning Palpatine.
Whatever Moff Gideon is doing. Yeah,
that's annoying.
The whole Mandalorian thing.
Let's just pretend that Palpatine never returned.
But somehow he did return.
It's so dumb. Why? Why did he need to return? He didn't need to return at all. Stop it. Stop. Disaster. I still love Rey and Kylo Ren, though. Just wish there wasn't Palpatine. That's all. Just make Kylo Ren the bad guy at that point.
Wish.
We could have done it better, Mike. All right. Well, I appreciate your time. Tell Olive and Anna I said hello. And we're out of here. We'll see what Savon has to say. I think he's going to try and hop on tomorrow. We'll see if he agrees or disagrees with what you
I can't
said.
wait.
I'm sure he'll mostly agree and then have a really weird fence-sitting disagree take. All right, lady. Bye.
Incredible.
What's up, Savon?
Hey, what's cracking, Big Wes?
Today?
I'm doing.
Happy Saturday to you.
Ooh.
It's my 6th wedding anniversary today on the day we're recording. My daughter's 2-year-old birthday is tomorrow.
Those are all bunched up? Dang.
I know. It's all happening all together.
Dang, you married for 6 years?
Fall break, man. Fall break.
How long you and Jim been together?
Oh, I don't know. Since 2011, I think. Like the middle, like summer of 2011.
Oh,
so it's been a while.
But
that's 12 years.
Yeah, that's when I was in. That's when I graduated high school. Good Lord.
There's no way you graduated.
I finished high school. Yeah, I finished high school in 2011, class of 2011.
Man,
times.
Nothing makes you feel old like that.
All
right. Well, I didn't know if we were going to be able to talk about Ahsoka, so I had that conversation with Mike, and he kind of shared his opinion. So I
wish I could have been there with Mike. That would have been so fun.
I wanted to get a different opinion, so I'm glad that you're here. You could share your ideas. So we're gonna do this real quick. I'm gonna kind of more fade to the background on this part of the show because I was able to, I think, say what I wanted to say when I was talking with Mike, and we'll hear that in the beginning of the show. So then we'll have this conversation with me and you together, still about Ahsoka. A show that I just really enjoyed. Like I said, before, just the fighting, especially, and the action was to me just so engaging and so fun, and the characters were interesting. I think I wanted more from them, but they were all interesting. All right, so I think the first part to start on this one, kind of where I started with Mike, was the villains of this show all kind of stood out as their own characters. They were all kind of a little bit different. 2 of them or 3 of them are new. We've got Morgan Elsbeth, which you've seen in a previous show, but she's new to the live action.
Mm-hmm.
Shin Hati is new. Baylan Skoll is new. And then Grad Admiral Thrawn is kind of a throwback to some old novels, and then made his way into the Rebels universe.
Mm-hmm.
So what stood out to you about the villains? Did you enjoy them? Did you not? Did you not enjoy them? How did they work for you, Savon Jones? AKA Captain Vonnie.
Yeah, boy, yeah. So this is interesting. I ultimately really enjoyed the villains of the show. My questions at first were one of, it's an 8-episode series. How much can you actually develop these characters in this time to give them agency, give them meaning, give them meaningful screen time? That was always my big question about what Rebels was going to do. And not Rebels, I'm sorry, Ahsoka was going to do, but we might as well call it Rebels too.
I know.
Right?
Mike said it's Rebels season 5.
Low key, right? But I ultimately enjoyed the characters. I think what made the villain stand out, honestly, was a combination of their acting, having very different visual aesthetics and vibes, and because the show doesn't just end at the end of, it doesn't just end at episode 8. It's definitely a cliffhanger. There's definitely more to go. I actually really like that when it's all said and done, because it gives you more runway. It lets me know, hey, we have more planned for these characters. So if you feel like, oh, I wish I could have gotten more of them, it lets you know, hey, their story is not over. We're probably going to get some kind of Ahsoka season 2 or an expansion of the story. So that gave me high hopes. I would have been more disappointed if this show kind of ended just as a one-off, we're done with this story, because I don't think there would have been enough time to let the villain shine. Now, that's me talking from a kind of more zoomed out view, looking at them collectively. Zeroing in on the villains individually, I'll go through them. So Balin Skull, very brooding character, has his own ulterior motives. Again, him acting wise, I loved his acting, his demeanor. He always has this really sad and somber, almost regretful, aloof vibe and look of him, to where even when he's doing villainous things to advance the plot, he's never really happy about it. He's very much just, it's all a means to an end. He feels very above all of this, which his dialogue with his apprentice on the planet kind of shows that's exactly where his head is at. Even tying his ending to the whole mother, son, father thing that we got to see in Clone Wars, which it took me a second to kind of make that connection, was really interesting, because we have this character who is not a Jedi affiliate, has a Padawan. The Padawan has the Jedi, even like the little Jedi, a Padawan braid, but he uses a orange lightsaber. He's essentially not necessarily hard dark side, but sure as hell not light side. In fact, he seems to be more of a neutral, I want to break the cycle, break the wheel altogether. What I'm more curious about is, now that the actor has passed away earlier this year, RIP, what are they going to do with that thread line? I'm sure they're going to either recast or do rewrites. I don't know. But the potential of that is really exciting and actually had me wanting for more. Even the apprentice Shin, honestly, I thought she was a little dry throughout the show. Like, I liked her aesthetic, but she didn't really have a lot to do. She was kind of just nameless goon. But even at the end, even her
just bloodlusty. She wanted to fight. That was it.
Yeah, but even at the end, when her master is giving her that convo, you go kill him, he's like, well, you're not coming with me? And he's like, no, we're kind of going out parting ways. Honestly, that moment alone, her conflict, her confusion, her trying to actually listen to his knowledge of, those who try to rush to victory lose. I really enjoyed something about that, because she kind of was thrown for a loop just as much as me. And honestly, that one little scene and sequence of dialogue actually made me way higher on her character, just because they were setting up for like, oh, this character suddenly is going to have some really interesting stuff going on, because she's going to lose her master. She's also still stranded on this planet. She had that weird ending of, is she bullying the people to try and take over them? She looked kind of not really confident about what she was doing. Ahsoka even let her go, saying, I can help you. So maybe we're setting up a redemption arc, because maybe, she's on the younger side, so she didn't live pre-Jedi. So
yeah,
they have a nice foundation for a character to do interesting things with. And the potential of what they do with this later on is going to be really, really fun. Like, that's genuinely enjoying. Morgan, the Night Sister. I've always been a fan of the Night Sisters in Star Wars lore. I really appreciate that Star Wars in general has these third-party, not Jedi Sith factions that are Force users, so that it makes the universe feel more real, of like, hey, it's not just the Jedi who use the Force. Other people, it's a natural phenomenon that exists, so it makes perfect sense that other societies could, harness it for their own means. So it gives a different aesthetic. They have the green soul energy vibe, the resurrecting the dead type stuff. Morgan's design was just awesome. Her getting that soul stealer looking katana was sick. The Night Mothers and their design was awesome. That ethereal vibe. So, just these three, I haven't even gotten to Thrawn yet, but just across these villains, they look different. They want different things. Even Morgan was saying, not for the Empire, for Dathomir. Like I said, I've talked about this when I enjoyed the Obi-Wan show. I love when you have villains who all still have their very much own agendas, own culture, own background, all values. And the three main villain factions all could not be more different, right? You have these former mercenary Jedi, these space magic witch women, and then just like a military fascist. But they're all on the same page. You're like, yo, F Ahsoka. And it's great. It works really well. And on that same note, they had great fight scenes.
We have a common enemy right now.
Yeah, we have a common enemy. But then, but that manifested in the fight scenes too. Balin having this heavy great sword style of combat, and straight up, he's strong. Like even he said, "Yo, Ahsoka wasn't gonna win off being stronger because she wasn't." The apprentice being formidable and having her own style of fighting that was more nimble, but not clearly the best because she was clearly getting washed by Ahsoka in low effort every time. Morgan,
I mean, Ahsoka is very experienced at this point. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah, but I like that it was they kind of clearly had a hierarchy amongst people's fighting. Like Shin and Sabine, their apprentices were on their own level, but Sabine was clearly weaker than Shin. But then, Balin was clearly better than Ahsoka. He beat her pretty much every fight they had pretty handily. Ahsoka was not about to win. But Morgan, who Ahsoka's beat twice, it just, I don't know. I like that they just had a clear hierarchy, but still good fight scenes and satisfying fight scenes. And they were aesthetically all different, fun, vibey. And that just really sold me on the villains for the show. And then lastly, I have to talk about Thrawn, who, oof, they knocked
the big
that
blue
shit.
Bad.
They knocked
the real
that
blue
shit
beetle.
out of the park.
You think so?
Oh, so the episode me and Brian talked
All right,
about.
tell me why.
Okay, so when Brian and I talked about Ahsoka before when you were traveling,
when you were roasting me for half that episode.
Baby, that's right. When you were with your wife and child,
roasted me. Just took that opportunity and lit me on fire.
Hey,
couldn't even defend myself.
It was like a light flame. Okay, we called you a good father. Be okay. Be happy with that.
And then you said no drip having ass father.
I said what I said. Hey, you can't have it all. You get the good father points.
You're right.
You put your points to being a good parent. Like I said, I've met drippy people who are awful parents. So
this isn't my career with unlimited VP, huh? Or PC.
No. You put your foot into a parent build, not a style build. But so when Brian and I were talking about it in that first impressions, the big question was, why should I care about Thrawn? He's this guy who's off on another planet. He's not some type of force-using monster. We haven't really seen him on screen. He's just an off-screen threat people talk about. So my biggest issue with Ahsoka early on was, why should I care or be threatened by Thrawn? Oh, Thrawn's going to return. I'm like, all right, but why should I care? It's one dude with maybe some Imperial remnants. I'm not afraid of this relative to other villains we've seen in the show who have more resources, more dangerous troops, or more dangerous themselves. Like, Moff Gideon had the Darksaber and his badass armor and his little Dark Trooper group. The Emperor and Darth Vader and them and the Inquisitors are all these dangerous armor-wearing Force users. Why should I care about some blue general, right? Yep. And for folks who have seen Rebels, we talked about how if you've seen Rebels, you understand how formidable Thrawn is. But the question is, if you haven't seen Rebels, why should Thrawn be a threat that you are invested in? And I was really going to hold this at, and I know from reading the novels and stuff that Thrawn is a threat, but you got to sell me as someone who hasn't seen it in the live action context. And I do not think they could have done it any better than they did. He's soft-spoken, he's quiet, he's calm, he's collected. He has this almost creepy level of just, he's always in control. He's not monologuing like the Emperor type villains. He's not being sad and brooding like Darth Vader and some of the Inquisitors. He's not dramatic. He's just very much like, this is his day job and he's just really, really good at it. But he does feel
very good at it.
Except his day job is being a military fascist general dictator dude. And he just sold me on that. He never raised his voice. He never yelled. He's always polite. Even when he's talking to his clear arch enemies who are the reason he's stranded here, he says, you help my cause, I help yours. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. You honor your part, I honor my part. He has that weird, but then clearly once they leave, he's like, all right, cool, we're gonna send you two people and you're gonna go kill them. Like, all right, this is where
he's just very calculated, right?
Yeah, and so they sold me on his intelligence immediately. Because I know in Rebels does this, and I'm sure maybe if Mike watched Rebels, he'd probably talk about it a little bit, of Thrawn being taught that he's this chess master, really intelligent. He's always calm. He's always, if you're 4 steps ahead, he's 6 steps ahead, and they just portrayed that extremely well. The alliance that he formed with the Night Sisters on the planet, the fact that he still had his people who are fanatically loyal to him, but still have been there for ages, him being just very aware of their limited resources, and he actively factors that into his decision-making. He takes an L and says, acceptable losses, but I had a bigger plan, so it all worked out. I think what really sold me on him was the, Ahsoka's here. I thought she was dead. Okay, well, she's not. Give me the scouting report. Tell me everything I need to know about this person. And then he used his homework effectively, right? oh,
Yeah.
you're a Padawan of Anakin. That means you definitely have picked up and probably act the way he did, because I know how Anakin was. And he hard reads Ahsoka the entire last 2 episodes. And it doesn't feel like villain hand wavy bullshitty, in my opinion. It felt earned because the dude was legitimately being smart. Oh, more whales are probably going to show up if blah 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 has happened. Oh, you didn't kill Ahsoka? Well, I know from personal experience, and we all know if anyone's watched Star Wars, that a single Jedi's heroics can absolutely make your plans go ass up. And so it's like the opposite of the villain who's perpetually underestimating his foes. It's like Thrawn has actually watched all of the Star Wars movies himself and says, "Hey man,
he took
if y'all
notes.
let this
He watched the game tape. He watched the film.
if you exactly, he did his homework. If you let this loose thread be a loose thread, your whole plan will unravel." I've been there. He said, literally, it's happened to me. He literally said, never again. Never again. And
Fool me once, right?
Fool me once. And he was just like, they were like, it's just, even when Morgan was like, they have no chance. He's like, I've seen one Jedi F it all up. We not taking nothing to chance. We dealing with them. We're going to. So that vibe just so, they just did him really. Yeah, just the acting was well done. And then ultimately, even his plan worked like a charm. Everything he wanted to do worked. He says, Sabine, okay, she's going to be useful because we can keep her far away from here. Ahsoka's not dead, so we're going to use them as bait to basically keep Ahsoka away. It buys us time to do all of our cargo loading stuff, which they had been talking about. And, he's willing to use her to stall, so, Morgan to stall so they can finish their plan. And then he successfully leaves and strands them there. His plan worked hook, line, and sinker. And frankly, I didn't know if they were going to do a season 2 for this. So I'm surprised that it ended with like a Thrawn winning, because that sells me on the threat that he poses. He had limited resources and was able to just send an emergency signal using Night Sisters, get someone to build this illegal tech, come out there, pick them up, finesse the people there so that he could strand his enemies there and have time to leave. And he all just did it like it was a casual Sunday morning. Like, yeah, just another day.
Yeah.
That made him a credible threat in my eyes. And that was the thing I was explicitly looking for and judging the show on. And had they fallen flat on that, it would have made the show end on a very sour note, because you're building up to a villain who maybe can't deliver. And he absolutely delivered.
I think I think you're right. I love that you pointed that out. I wasn't sold on the fact that I think this show didn't do a good job explaining why Thrawn was so beholden or so loyal to the Empire, and why he was so motivated to be this excellent mastermind in service of Imperial domination or whatever. And at this point the Empire has been displaced or broken apart or whatever. Is his idea that we're going to reinstall the Empire? The Emperor at this point is dead. There's just a whole lot of I'm not sure why you are the way you are, or why you're using your talents in this particular way, right? If you have all this mastermind 4 steps ahead, why not start making loads of money, or try and do something where you manipulate economic powers. You could choose to do this in a whole bunch of different ways. Why is this the way that you wanted to do it? And we just didn't really get a sense, to me, of what he's actually hoping to get out of this. Mike was just it doesn't matter, he's a Nazi, he just wants Nazis to rule, so that's what he is. And I was like, okay, fine, but he seems much deeper than that, and they didn't establish that in this show. And maybe they did in Rebels, and so maybe that was something that I missed out by not having watched that show yet. So I don't know. I think that's a little miss.
I think he's always been characterized as that. I think he's actually, even in the novels, he's always been kind of just characterized as he's just, to Mike's point, he's not really meant to be deeper in terms of his personal motivations. He's a classic just fascist dictator military villain. He's just really, really good at it in a way that maybe you don't see in other mediums. Because most other portrayals of, really cruel military characters is that they're dangerous, they're competent, but maybe they're more meat-headed, and they're more, I'm looking for a fight. But for him, I don't think most of the time you get these military type characters who are very actually intelligent, cold, calculated.
Yeah.
So I don't think the motivation of the character is meant to be some new, unique thing. I think it's just his actual demeanor and efficacy is supposed to be what makes him a good character, not his why.
Yeah.
It's his process that matters, not his process, not his what is it?
Not his aims.
You don't have a
Yeah, but like
you don't have a system, you have like a method or something.
Oh yeah. But how, you know, for someone who's supposed to be such a high level tactician and analyst, right? Someone who can see the whole board all at once, right? This grand chess master. Well, couldn't he see that like the Empire has huge flaws in that way, right? Like there's no way to hold the entire Empire together and do it in the bureaucracy in the way that they did it. Like he would realize all of that too and realize like the Empire itself was flawed in the way that it was organized. And I would think that like I would give him.
I think you're overthinking it, dog.
Well, given how smart, right, he is, or how, you know, they've established that how great he is at figuring things out, like I think he would be able to see once he hears the Empire has fallen in the way that it fell, he'd be like, oh yeah, like the hubris of the Emperor, the way that like we oppressed everybody and inspired a rebellion, right, is actually what led to the downfall of the Empire. And now here he is like, well, okay, I'm gonna just fight for the same organization that actually has a ton of inefficiencies, when that's not his thing. He's very much about like, hey, what's the cost? What's the benefit? You know, let's go for it. So I don't know. We'll see where he goes in season 2, if they bring him back or if they bring back in season 2.
So my counterpoint is that all throughout Star Wars, the Republic and New Republics have been portrayed as a more incompetent form of government than the Empire pretty consistently.
All right.
In the prequel trilogy, the Republic is portrayed as a bloated bureaucracy that doesn't get stuff done, right? That's the entire reason that the Separatist movement that the Emperor, you know, false flag props up is meant to like make valid points about, like, you know, one of the main issues in like Star Wars Episode 1 is that the Republic actually only cares about X planets. They're actually inefficient. Slavery still happens on places like Tatooine where it's lawless. They actually are inefficient with stopping the Naboo trade, stuff. Like, I know people don't like Episode 1, but the movie made some good points about criticizing, like, the first prequel trilogy is entire about saying, hey, the Republic actually is kind of mid right now, and a lot of their issues are of their own creation, right? And so even the New Republic, good lord, the entire thing we talked about with all the New Republic is the same issue of their inefficient and all this. So, like, if we're gonna go that route, it kind of makes more sense why he's so fanatically loyal to the Empire. Again, I don't think you have to make it that deep, because if you want to go that route, then you can give everybody a reason. Everyone has some reason about why they shouldn't support the faction they are, but I don't think it's meant to be that deep. Some people are villainous and support villainous causes, even if they're extremely capable and intelligent, and it is what it is. You know, not even in real life, lots of military dictators are very intelligent or capable, and it's like, oh, why don't you just go into making money? Because some people care about power and their ideals and enforcing their will, even if they're shitty, even if they're really, really bad for everybody else, you know? Like, you can be an intelligent person and a capable person and still have dumb beliefs or have a flawed, you know, some of the most intelligent people I've met have still had certain viewpoints of like, yo, what the hell is this?
I feel attacked right now.
Like,
I feel attacked right now.
No, I'm not talking. No, I'm actually, this is actually a thinly veiled attack at like my government. You know, think about how many folks in our government are educated, probably lawyers, have all the formal learning in the world, but then have some of them just most batshit dumb ideals you've ever seen. You know, I don't think it's that
Ted
complicated.
Cruz, we're looking at you. All right.
I'm saying they got some intelligent dudes who's just like, yo, you smart as hell. Why are you doing what you're doing right now? Like, why are you actively trying to destroy the country?
All right. I wanted to move on, because otherwise this pod will be as long as an entire Star Wars movie itself. So I wanted to talk a little bit about like what didn't work for you. You know, like Star Wars fans love to hate on it. In fact, our co-host Brian didn't join the show because he loves to hate on Star Wars so much. He was just like, I'm not talking about that show anymore. I'm done. Brian, RIP, we miss you. You'll be back on our next show, I'm sure. But what for you didn't work about this show? Were there some things you're like, I wish they just did it differently, or they tightened it up, anything like that?
I guess I just didn't find Sabine to be the most interesting of characters, and she was kind of meant to be like the deuteragonist of this show. And there were moments where I was really enjoying her, and other moments where I'm like, bro, what the hell are you doing? And I guess her character just felt a little all over the place for me sometimes, where I understand how she actually feels about things, but even some of her decision making felt like, yo, this feels excessively impulsive. Yeah, this feels like I get people doing I get characters doing things that we as a viewer don't like in the moment out of desperation and such, but I felt that her obsession with finding her friend Ezra did not justify some of just the self-sabotaging that she had did previously. And the idea of her essentially trading, letting Thrawn and these Night Mothers go free into the galaxy in exchange for strength, the switch with Ezra, to me just felt like, dude, I get that we do foolish things in the heat of the moment for folks that we care about, but this felt like a bit more of a no-brainer. Like, she had a lot more moments to, it's not like it was a gun to your head moment and she had to make an impossible choice. I just felt like some of her silly decisions she made, I'm like, dude, you had a lot more agency in preventing this from happening, and that makes me a little bit lower on your character's decision. Like, when she just willingly went with the folks, did all that, went to the place, all for a chance to find Ezra.
I mean, it was willingly, but also Baylan Skoll is like a supremely talented Force user and would have sliced her up if she didn't want to give up the map.
Yeah, and that's true, but I don't know. I mean,
so there was benefit to her.
Yeah, and maybe this is like, it's not what she did. Maybe it's how they sold it or how they portrayed it. But to me, it felt like she was a little too eager to sell out any hopes of... Like, I know that they were clearly taking advantage of her obsession with finding Ezra, but I would have liked for her to be a little bit more self-aware of, you know that this is actively blinding your judgment, and...
Yeah.
I guess she just kind of frustrated me in that of, like, I get that people make foolish decisions, but I think how they portrayed it made it a little harder for me to empathize as much as I think the writers wanted me to empathize with her. Because it wasn't like, I felt more of a, yo, that was some dumb shit you just did, rather than, woof, you had a tough call to make and you did what you thought was best. Like, to me, just how you portray that made me lean more towards the former than the latter. So it didn't, like, ruin the show, but it made me feel like, man, this whole second act, we could have avoided this way more easily than, like, this was a lot more avoidable than we realized. And even Thrawn says, your obsession with finding Ezra, man, how this is going to just basically flip the fate of the galaxy. I'm like, yeah, that was really, really dumb, Sabine. Like, that was, I'm like,
but
you could have sliced it. She could have destroyed, like, she had it in her hand. She could have destroyed the thing. And we could have rolled credit. And I know that you can't do that because then you don't have a show.
Right.
But
right.
I don't know. I don't know. There's just ways. Maybe they could have beat her ass and then take it. And then she says no. I don't know. That I just was frustrated with her.
I believed it. She was someone who was, like, hell-bent on anything she could do to bring Ezra back because she was so miserable without him, right? She was still lamenting. I mean, this is what, 10, 15 years after the fact. She's still lamenting the fact that Ezra is gone. She'll show up to that parade because she's like, it reminds her of Ezra.
You know what the problem is, Wes?
She's still stuck on this thing. And I don't know. I mean, I believed it. I bought into it. I was like, I think we're supposed to empathize with her. I think we just understand that, like, she's doing this. Like, she has no care at all for, like, well, the cost
her
to the galaxy.
Her blatant disregard of everybody else is like, dude.
Yeah.
What you doing?
She's like, maybe it'll work out. Maybe we'll find a way to stop him when we get there. But, like, if I don't do this, then I know for sure Ezra's not coming back. So I better go ahead and do this because this is my only chance. And I get that too. I mean, if it was your brother or sister, well, no, we
had this conversation. We had this conversation. I would have said, look, if I'm stranded on some lost island or something and y'all can save me, come save me. But if y'all saving me means that you unleash, like, space Hitler on the planet, selfishly, on some level, I'll be like, hey, y'all probably should. Like if they come to save me, I'm going to be like, yo, that was nice. But, like, yo, that was kind of dumb. Because now y'all unleash space Hitler on the planet, and it's like, oof, now he about to F over a lot of people. I'm like, ooh, y'all did all that for me? Like, thank you, but, like, I don't know if that was it, Chief.
Yeah.
Every person who Thrawn kills afterwards, that is literally on Sabine, like, directly.
That's not how it works. That is on.
She had the thing in her hand and could have destroyed it. But overall,
she's not responsible.
But that was like, but that ruined the show for me. But it was if I have to say this is a thing that I wasn't a fan of, that would be the thing that I zero in on. That being said, I didn't see Rebels, and I think if I had seen Rebels, maybe I'd be more bought into, like, their relationship, but I didn't get to see it, so it was hard for me to vibe. Is this a really, really good platonic relationship? Are there romantic undertones? I didn't see Rebels, so I didn't see how they developed. If I had seen Rebels, I think I would be more bought into, like, I've seen 5 seasons of what the hell they've been through together. I understand why now years later you can't move on because this person changed your life in such a profound way. I know that happened, but I didn't see that journey. And so I fully recognize that people who've maybe seen Rebels can maybe better understand how headstrong she was about it. But for me, she was being headstrong about a character who I didn't really get to see on screen until the last 2 episodes, which he was great. I loved him. He was awesome too. And he lived up to the hype they were building up to with him. Absolutely. Nonetheless, me not knowing that pre-existing relationship, I think makes it a little harder to understand some character motivations. And maybe that's the case with Thrawn too. Maybe we'd have to watch Rebels to better understand his feelings about the Empire too, although I've just taken him as intelligent villain for awful cause. But like, and this isn't like a hard thing I'm holding against the show, but it didn't stop me from appreciating the plot. But I definitely think some of the character motivations are a little bit carried by a previous show that maybe you would have had to have seen to really relate to it. And Ahsoka got her flashbacks to build it out.
I wish they would have brought more of that.
Yeah, and Ahsoka had her flashbacks for you to understand what she had been through. So even if you haven't seen Clone Wars, you understand why she is the way she is. But they didn't quite do that for Sabine, which I'm not saying they should have because that's what the Rebel show is for. But like, this is just the pros and cons of having a narrative tied that's a big picture narrative to multiple shows. You can do dope stuff, but there are some cons. This is just a natural con. I'm not saying they shouldn't have done it, but this is just me calling it like I see it.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes shows will like sort of catch you up a little bit, right? You know, it just give you a taste of it, kind of give you a sense of it. And I think this show didn't do as much of that, and I wish they would have done a little bit more because so many people are in the same boat as us, right? They haven't seen Rebels. Maybe they've seen Clone Wars, maybe they haven't. But if you've only seen the live action stuff so far, like you're just missing some of the context. I think that would have been helpful. And I wish they would have just given us a little bit more of that, I don't know, hand holding a little bit, you know, but that's okay.
Have the previously on have clips from Rebels.
Exactly. So there have been now, I think 5 different titles from Disney Plus Star Wars shows. Mm-hmm. There's Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, mm-hmm. Obi-Wan Kenobi, mm-hmm. Andor, and Ahsoka, not in any particular order. How would you, Savon Jones, rank them? Do you want to know how me and Mike ranked them? Because we were pretty much the same.
Shoot.
Okay, we went Andor first, Ahsoka second, Mandalorian third, and then the other two kind of a distant, fourth and fifth. I think it was Obi-Wan first, and then last Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah,
we kind of agreed.
Yeah, I'd probably put, for me, Mandalorian is the best. I think Mando is definitively better. I would probably put Ahsoka, Andor, and Obi-Wan in like their own similar tier, definitively below Mandalorian, but all a solid like B-ish tier, B-ish, B plus, A minus-ish tier, where they're all good in different ways. For me, the hairs get split based on just what you as a viewer are into. Like I've said before, Andor isn't my kind of Star Wars show, but I won't let my personal preferences knock the actual quality and writing of the show, which was great, compared to Ahsoka and Obi-Wan, which I think had probably definitively weaker writing than Andor, but also gave me more of the classic Star Wars experience that I appreciate in different ways. And, for Obi-Wan, I appreciated the characters and whatnot. For Ahsoka, I appreciated, honestly, the lightsaber fights and some of just like the set pieces and scenery, which is something that Obi-Wan didn't quite have in the same way. But that wasn't the focus of Obi-Wan. Like for that, it was the flashbacks and character building and whatnot.
And him getting to battle Vader again.
Yeah, that stuff. So they both so they gave me different Star Wars fan service things in different ways for different reasons. So I'll put them all in one tier. And then I definitively put Boba Fett just at the bottom for the reason the show had a great premise, but they took a former Imperial bounty hunter and tried to whitewash his past in a way that just made him a very kind of just inconsistent character. And that, that hurt. That being said, Boba Fett is elevated because it was also, Mandalorian season 2.5. So, but it still is the weakest show pretty definitively. But overall, these shows are solid. They cater to different audiences. They do different things. And I am excited for more of whatever these shows we get down the line or continuations of these shows. I'm not sitting here thinking, I've had enough. I want more.
Interesting. See, I kind of feel differently. I feel like I'm not as high on these shows in general. I kind of wish, if someone was asking me, hey, Wes, would you recommend the Star Wars Disney Plus shows? I'd be like, Andor.
They're better
and
than
then
the
I would stop there.
movies.
I'd be like, oh, if you're really into Star Wars, yeah, you should watch Ahsoka and you should watch Mandalorian. But if you're not into Star Wars and you're just looking for like a good show to watch, Andor is the only show I'm recommending to people. Does that make sense?
No, I get what you're saying. No, no. I mean, I don't think you're wrong necessarily. I just
And
think
like shows, I want shows to be able to stand up on their own too, not just because I love Star Wars or because I'm into that world or I've seen other things, but like they also just have to bring their own, like high tier talent tier, production, whatever, to the table.
See, I think the acting and such is better in a lot of the Star Wars shows than some of the recent movies have been, in my opinion. And as far as it standing up on its own, you're not wrong. But Star Wars will always be a franchise that interconnects because it's one large universe. And that goes for the old stuff too. Even if you're watching the old Star Wars movies, like when I was a kid, I used to have the prequel trilogy I grew up to, and I didn't watch the original trilogy until afterwards. But even then, me having watched those movies as a kid, it's still clearly tied into certain ways in the movies. So Star Wars has always been that way, where you can watch the movies, but if you want to know the larger story, you got to watch the larger content. So I think that's just indicative of the IP period. So not to say that you still don't have to watch the movies, but like I would still take some of these shows over some of the movies in terms of which one is a better viewing experience for somebody. Because no matter what, if I tell my friend who's never watched Star Wars, watch the Star Wars movies, either way, you got to watch a bunch of stuff to understand what's happening. If that's the case, I might as well throw you at a show that I think is just better than a movie that like you still have to put in just as much time into for maybe way less payoff and just less overall quality. Because especially recent movies, the lightsaber fights aren't as good, the characters aren't as interesting, the acting is arguably not as good.
The throne room lightsaber scene is amazing.
Yeah, but that was and I agree, it was amazing. But
and then when he pulls the lightsaber out of his back when in the last movie, because they somehow did a force transfer.
They had some moments. Don't get it twisted. But I think these Disney Plus shows have still just had better Star Wars fight scenes and action sequences, which that's not me knocking the movies. That's just saying these shows have done things. They do things well.
All right. Shout out to what is her name? The one who plays Morgan Elsbeth. I keep forgetting her name. Diana Lee Inosanto. Her fight scenes are incredible. Back when she did like that samurai kind of standoff with Ahsoka in Mandalorian, and then
that was good.
All of her fight scenes in this one, and she picked up a totally different style, right? Like you're saying that blade, the Talzin blade, that was kind of more of a Chinese sword fighting style, I think, probably, or maybe a Filipino sword fighting style, and it was just great to see her get
different than the spear fight. She had like a whole pole arm spear deal.
Having her be multi-talented, she has a stunt background, or a fighting background, and I think she's actually related to Bruce Lee. I think she's his niece or something. She's
goddaughter, huh?
Goddaughter, okay. And so them being able to like utilize her in that way was just really cool to see her, and such a different fighting style than Ahsoka, way different than Baylan Skoll. So I just love that in this show we were able to see that, and then even like. Hayden Christensen, like he has a different fighting style too, and he did a great job, I thought, like when they were fighting in the world between worlds. So this show had all the lightsaber battles for days. Sabine being able to use her Beskar armor, her blasters, and her lightsaber all at once, right? What a great, and that's meaningful because that's her character, right? So it's a fight that
Ahsoka
actually
even says,
more about her character.
Use your blasters.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah, in the fight, she's like, "Hey, you're using a lightsaber? Yeah, get the blicky out.
Yeah.
Well, stop all get the blammers out. Hey, I know you got the sword. I know you're trying to flex with the two Jedi. Hey, you shoot people.
Yeah. Well, and then she goes back to the she goes back to the lightsaber, but that's a moment of characterization, right? It's like she's compiling all of her different backgrounds and identities into one, and that comes through in her fight. And so, like, well done on the stunt coordinating team and on the choreography team to like really understand the story of Sabine and put it together in the fight, right? And tell us more about who they are as a character. And they did that through any of these characters, I think, for the most part. So it was cool. And even with Ezra, like, he's one hand tied behind his back, in some ways, and he's refusing to use the lightsaber, but it's also chosen, right? And that's kind of what happened, right? He chose to like leave the universe or leave the galaxy, and he's fighting kind of blindly right now. But that was all, I don't know, it's all symbolism in the fight for who these people are as characters and what's happened to them. All right, buddy. let's wrap up there. This is the most epic show now about Ahsoka, which was great. Oh, I forgot. Do you remember when she did the thing where she swirled the lightsabers in a circle and fell through the temple ceiling? Oh man,
Oh, come on, the first episode.
that was
Yes.
so good. Yeah, I don't know. This show had very cool moments.
I'm glad you like Ahsoka now.
I do. Ahsoka. I didn't like that she showed up in that fucking episode and then disappeared because reasons. Stupid. No reasons. All right. Any last thoughts before we head on out?
No, solid show, entertaining. I enjoyed it. Rosario Dawson was really, really good, and my biggest thing, her character became increasingly better as the show went on, and I'm glad that her theme was one about trust, not being defined by your past, a little bit of self-actualization. It wasn't as like sexy as some other people's self-actualization, personal growth, but I like the arc that her character went through, and I'm really excited for what they're going to do after, now that she's stranded on this planet that clearly has a lot of significance. So I'm excited for more.
Yeah. She was literally reborn in a different set of clothing for the second half of the show.
Yeah, I mean, I like the symbolism. I'm excited. I was excited. So I can't wait to see more. I like what the show did, and they planted some really dope seeds for what they're going to do with it later.
All right. Dave Filoni, bring us season 2. And then ultimately, I think he's going to be heading, there's some kind of film on the way at some point, right? A Dave Filoni Star Wars film. So hopefully that'll be amazing. We'll see if it ties into Rey or not. What if Rey and Ahsoka get together? Bro, I'm here for that. That would be awesome. It's too much.
Hard neutral.
But I would love to see it. That would be I would be excited. If Rey and Ahsoka teamed up at some point in a movie,
that could be badass.
I'm watching it. All right, buddy. I will talk to you later. Have a great weekend. Peace out.
All righty. Peace.
Bye. Oh, hit us up on socials at confidently_pod.
Yeah, holla at the boys.
Yeah, and thanks to Mike for appearing on the show. A little guest spot. And good luck in getting married next weekend, Mike. Have a good one. Later, y'all. Bye.